Hey everybody, what's going on? Helmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today's topic is going to be a topic that is close to my heart at least, and that is Juggernauts and their current state in the meta. Now, I do feel like for the most part Juggernauts are decent in solo queue environments or in casual environments where you don't necessarily have super good comps forming between people. Everyone's kind of playing what they want to play, and that's totally fine, but I think in competitive play and professional play especially, that Juggernauts need a bit of love. Now, I am not entirely unbiased. I main a lot of Juggernauts. I think my top 3 champions in the top lane are probably Garen, Alawi, and Darius. So I play a lot of these guys, so maybe I'm not the right person to talk about this, but I think I do bring up some points that should be addressed. And a lot of that is that Juggernauts don't do enough and require too much in order to be effective in today's day and age. Now, for those of you who are unaware, a Juggernaut is supposed to be a fighter who has high damage and high tankiness at the same time, which at first might seem like a very strange mix, but Juggernauts are hampered by their relative lack of mobility. If you think about champions like Garen, Darius, Mundo, Volibear, all of them have fairly high damage if they can close on you, but have difficulties getting there. Their really only recourse of action is to run at you really fast and hope that you don't have any crowd control or that you can kite them afterwards. So, and that's kind of how they're supposed to be balanced, is that if a Juggernaut does reach you, they'll do a high amount of damage and be very tough to kill. Juggernauts are not initiators, unlike someone like Malphite or a Mumu. They don't start fights. Juggernauts are instead the follow-up. So Malphite goes in, he hits Unstoppable Force on 4 members of the enemy team, and that's when the Garen hits Decisive Strike, runs into the fray, and starts spinning, dealing, hopefully, tons of damage to the entire enemy team. Now, that's how things are supposed to work. However, I feel like in today's day and age, especially with fewer Vanguards being played, that Juggernauts have trouble succeeding in a lot of games. And I feel like that isn't necessarily a bad thing, first of all. That a Juggernaut probably should have a lot of effort put into make them effective. However, right now you put a lot of effort in and they still don't do as much as you want to, unless you're playing a carry the Juggernaut comp, at which point, you know, is it really worth it? You should be putting those resources on your AD carry because they're a lot safer and they do more damage than a Juggernaut anyways. So, because in order to really make someone like Garen focus, say you know you're going to have a Garen in the top lane, well, you need to make sure he has access to the back line. So that means you need to play a Vanguard in the jungle. You probably want speed boosts on your support, so someone like Karma maybe or Nami who can set up the Juggernaut to get into the team fight. And you probably want some other buffs that you can layer on top of him in order to get there. Now, okay, realistically, the Juggernaut is not the champion that should be carrying the game. That should be the AD and AP carry. But I feel like they just don't do their job. Their job is to go in and do damage, and very frequently, they can't do either, even with all the support on the team to make them function. Meanwhile, you have an entire subclass of fighters called Divers that are very similar because they don't have to worry about this. They have relatively high damage, not as high as Juggernauts, or so it should be, but much more backline access. So someone like Vi or Aatrox or Xin Zhao, they have easier ways in and can do a high amount of damage, but are frequently not quite as tanky. Their goal is basically to go for the backline and draw aggression in that way, because if you don't kill them, they will kill your backline. Now, the biggest problem, though, is that Divers compete heavily with Juggernauts, as they're both fighters, and they both kind of fulfill the tanky DPS role, a la Bruisers, right? That's kind of where I guess that's what you could call the fighter class as a whole, or Bruisers. So, the biggest issue, though, is that Divers have a much easier time of it. They deal pretty comparable damage to Juggernauts, they have much easier backline, and they're only marginally less tanky. So someone like Vi does a much better job in team fights than someone like Garen because all she has to do is press R on the appropriate target and gets there. The other advantage they have is that they don't frequently have to fight through the front line. Like I said before in my earlier example, Vi presses R on the AD carry and she's there. She doesn't have to run past the Dr. Mundo. She doesn't have to run past all the crowd control and peel. She just presses a button and she's already there. So the case kind of becomes, why play Juggernauts when you can play Divers instead, who are just Juggernauts but better? And I think this is kind of disappointing because I feel like having an entire class of champions not be able to be played is disappointing. Now, if you look at the rest of the classes of the game, they are fairly well represented. If you're looking at battle mages, Vladimir and Swain are both decent champions to be picking for that role. If you're looking at vanguards, Malphite and Amumu are not terrible champions that you can play. Disruptors, enchanters, burst mages, control mages, they're everywhere. All class of champions are represented in the current meta except Juggernauts. So what can be done in order to fix this problem? I think that there are a couple of ways you can go about this. Number one being to give Juggernauts more target agnostic damage. And what I mean by this is that it shouldn't matter who the Juggernauts are hitting as long as they're hitting somebody. So, for example, Darius, I think, is a very good example of a fairly well-balanced Juggernaut. He's slow, he has difficulties getting in, but if he gets to the enemy team and he's able to stack, he's going to be dealing a true damage execute to everyone in the enemy team, and he gains a ton of bonus AD if he manages to get Noxian Might going. That is an example of a good Juggernaut. If he gets into the fight, and he's allowed to survive the fight, he's going to crush the fight by killing everyone with true damage. Meanwhile, though, the rest of the Juggernaut class is somewhat lacking. They don't have the target-agnostic damage to really worry about it. Darius can afford to hit tanks because he's stacking Noxian Might the whole time, and once he hits 5 stacks, he's going to do a lot of damage to everybody. Garen doesn't. If Garen spends all the fight hitting the Volibear, Garen is not going to do very much, unless Volibear is his villain. So, I think in general, Juggernauts need to have better target-agnostic damage. They need to be able to hit whomever in a fight and do reliable damage, and that way the counterplay would be keeping them off your backline. Champions like Nami, Janna, Caitlyn, Vayne, all of these champions can kind of control them and keep them from ever getting into a fight, and then kill them before they have a chance to do the damage. The other thing I would like to see is more item support directed at Juggernauts. I think that Deadman's Plate and Steric's Gauge are two items that do a lot to help Juggernauts function in fights. However, I don't think they go far enough. Deadman's Plate just gives bonus move speed, which kind of solves the Juggernaut's mobility issues, but not entirely. The other problem is that and Steric's Gauge isn't that great because it requires them taking a lot of damage, and they frequently can't make use of the bonus AD it provides. Especially because Steric's Gauge isn't a first or second item on most champions. It's pretty much a 4th or 5th item build. So, when I say item support, I would like to see more things like maybe a Juggernaut exclusive Righteous Glory of a type, right? Something that gives them massive bonus movement speed while moving towards enemy champions, but that hopefully doesn't build out of something that gives mana, because that feels pretty crappy to build that on people like Garen or Dr. Mundo. The other thing maybe would be a one-time item, kind of like Snowball on the ARAM map, that it's a single skill shot that goes out. If it hits a target, you can Lee Sin Q onto them. That way that they have a decent way of getting in, but it's a slow projectile, it's fairly telegraphed, it can be blocked, and on an item especially, you can give it a high cooldown, so it's available only once a fight, as opposed to twice a fight or 3 times a fight. And that would go a long way towards helping Juggernauts get in and hopefully dealing more damage. Alternatively, there needs to be a better way to build Juggernauts to help them do more damage to things and overall become stronger in these fights. So, and I realize that I'm kind of talking about a niche portion of League of Legends, but I do feel like because the Juggernaut rework technically happened, but it was a bit abortive in that it only covered 4 of them, it completely gutted Mordekaiser, and it didn't really solve Skarner's issues either. So, I want to kind of bring this up as a way of saying, hey, the Juggernaut rework happened, but it did not solve the problems inherent in this class, and I would like to see more work done on it in the future. Anyways, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video, and hit subscribe if you would like to see more content like this in the future. Alternatively, if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, go ahead and go to grabthelantern.tumblr.com, as I publish an article just about every other day, and you should be able to pick up all the content you want there. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching, and I will talk to you all later.